I'd like this to be lively, challenge things, do not accept statements if you don't agree with them. There are enough Europeans in the room that I know you will not be bashful, right? So let's make this fun, entertaining, and with the format I usually do, I'll ask a couple of questions. I got a lot, and I'm so impressed. People are prepared. I mean, look at this. Typed up, you know, answers written in between his or her purple Alain's. I mean, this is very European, I think. It's wonderful. Where are yours? So they all the German. He's the German. You'd think he'd be the one, right? So what I'd like to do, ask a couple of questions, and then if you have a comment, you know, don't make your comment too long. But if you have a question, please ask a question, and then we'll go back to the ones I have prepared. It's kind of a loose format, and I'd like it to be interactive and participatory. We're not here to lecture. Okay. So I'm going to ask each one a question, short but interesting. And that way they'll introduce themselves. So my first question is, and a lot of these questions were done for this group that's visiting, also as well as to satisfy our own curiosity. So generally you can't wait if you want to do something in Silicon Valley, you've got to go forward. Tell us in a short sentence or two, but not more, what you do, how you keep going forward in your career, so to say pushing the envelope, and what are the barriers you have to keep reinventing yourself, or how do you keep reinventing yourself? Because I think that's a big aspect of Silicon Valley. You cannot stay still. You constantly have to reinvent yourself. Do we have any other microphones, or are we going to put? Oh, you have those here.
Hi everybody, I'm Frédéric Tardy. I'm the CEO of L'Atelier. L'Atelier is the innovation lab of BNP Paribas. BNP Paribas is a French bank. We are the 5th bank in the world. So I'm running the innovation lab. We scout startups in Silicon Valley. We do that for the group on a marketing level. We do that also for other companies such as L'Oréal, Chanel, Page Jaune, Veolia, Total, many European companies. So we have also a radio show on BFM TV, which is a French radio, and we have a TV show on Intereconomia, which is a Spanish group. We broadcast in Spain and in South America. So what are the barriers and how I keep going forward in my career to pushing the envelope? I think that what is fantastic here is the American culture, and especially the Gen Y culture. I think that Silicon Valley is typically a Gen Y culture, and it's not that frequent to meet people on the same age. All the fantastic startups in Silicon Valley are from the Gen Y generation. If you look at Zuckerberg, and it's very interesting to understand this new generation and these new customers.
Hello, my name is Gefira. I'm the co-founder of Uber-Vismo, which is one of the top gadget blogs in the United States and in the world, because we have also a version in French and Spanish. So what is a gadget blog? Basically, we publish 60 articles a day about the latest smartphone, computers, TVs, and also about the new concept in technology. So how I keep reinventing myself. So I am lucky enough to actually meet all the entrepreneurs in the Silicon Valley. So I get briefed about always the latest technology. So part of my job actually inspired me to reinvent myself every day. So the main barrier is the lack of time. Because running a business, being an editor, and also we are doing the maintenance, because my background is in design, so I designed the brand and the website. So I wish I had more time to to develop new skills or learn new things.
Thank you.
I think this one works. Yeah. Hello, my name is Robert Oberhofer. I'm a VP of product for a company called Skyfly, which is based here in the Bay Area. I'm for 14 years now in mobile internet technology. So this was at a time, or it started at a time when people thought that internet and mobile phone is playing crazy. Most people didn't have a mobile phone then. So with regards to what drives me personally, I think it's always the desire to work on something that provides real value. That's something that I get excited about and I want to be involved in. And there's plenty of opportunity in the Bay Area. Things that are barriers and things that coming from a German background, and having worked in Ireland as well for a long time, that fascinates me about Silicon Valley culture is just a different attitude to risk as to what I've experienced beforehand. And there's a lot to learn coming from the background I've been at. And I find that very fascinating. It's just a different way of thinking about it. And so that's...
Hi, I'm Hubert Nguyen. I'm the co-founder of Uber Gizmo with Eliane. I have a background as a software engineer. And so what I love in Silicon Valley is if you want to build something, you can build anything that you can set your mind to. You can find the team to do that. But what's important is you have, when you can build anything, you have to be very careful at what you're going to build. Because you're going to invest a lot of time, a lot of energy. So just make sure that this is the right idea for what you want to do. And personally, I think that it's very hard to choose, what's the next thing that we should do. And it's always a question that's terribly difficult to answer.
Good evening. My name is Alan Harris. So I'm a partner at Crosslink Capital. That's a venture capital firm in San Francisco. I focus on early stage companies. So I just, way at the beginning, meet a team of entrepreneurs with a hardware idea and a hardware idea. So I'm kind of the point of view hardware on this panel. Everybody seems to have a software, social media. So early stage company on the hardware side. The reinvention came because I had a previous career before being a venture capitalist. I worked in the silicon industry, the semiconductor industry, for a long time, building chips all over the world and selling equipment. So now I'm on the other side, funding some of these innovative ideas that are making hardware cheaper and cheaper every day. And let's see, what was the other question? Barriers, yes. Time, Eliane mentioned time, definitely is a barrier. There's just never enough time, especially around here. There's always something going on. Also, venture capital, it turns out, is a little bit of a fashions business. So there are cycles in every area of investing. And right now, unfortunately, hardware is in a down cycle. So that's a barrier as well.
Perfect. So what I'm not going to do is have everyone answer the same question, because that's really deadly. And what I think for the next question, maybe Frédéric and Hubert, so in what areas does technology disrupt the status quo the most in Silicon Valley? And what are the effects, what are the effects when and if it crosses over to Europe? Hubert?
So from my perspective, disruption comes from when you have a new way of doing things in a much more efficient way than what was there before. And what I've seen a lot in recent years is anything that can enable a smaller company, a small group of people to do the same thing that a much larger organization is very disruptive. And for example, if you look at what Amazon is doing with their AWS service, they're empowering a very small group of people.
What's their AWS?
AWS is basically a web service that enables anyone to buy compute capacity, like servers, computers, on a virtual basis. So if you need 10,000 computers for 1 hour, you can do that. And it was something that was impossible just a few years ago. And with that technology, small startups that are very smart can equal very quickly, the largest companies in the world. And I think that this is a very disruptive technology, and anything that enables you to do something like that is amazing.
Follow-up question, does this, and then Frédéric, if you have another idea, he's always full of ideas. Are people in Europe using Amazon for the same things? Have they gotten the message?
Yeah, so the good news is Amazon is a global service. So anyone, pretty much everywhere in the world, I think you can use it. It's been leading here in the US because it's where it was invented, I guess. So US companies tend to have a little lead in terms of getting used to use that type of service and developing ideas based on that type of technology. But definitely this is something that Europeans can use too. And anyone,
question is, are they?
I think they are actually, but I would need to dig up some numbers for that.
So
I think that what is disrupting the most in terms of technology is the concept of SOLMO, social, local, mobile, especially when you need to geolocalize people physically. For example, when I arrived in San Francisco, of course I bought a smartphone, and I was discussing with the AT&T sales agent, and he told me, you should buy a smartphone for your kids. I said, oh, come on, my kid is only 5 years old. It's a bit young to buy a smartphone. And he told me, yes, but you know, there are earthquakes in Silicon Valley, and if you want to geolocalize your son during an earthquake, it can be useful. So, of course.
Smart salesman.
So when you are a father, of course, I bought a smartphone. My daughter, a teenager, was not happy at all because the young 5-year-old boy had an iPhone, but it was key. So and the salesman told me, yes, but you know, maybe it can be dangerous. You can also geolocalize people going out of jail. And I told him, no, I don't want to know my daughter close to somebody going out of jail. So I think that this is the main difference between Europe and the US. I think that European people will be very reluctant to geolocalize other people, even for dating. And now you have apps such as Girls Around Me or Manhunting. You can search people very easily. So I think that it's a big difference between Europe and the US. That in terms of privacy, you are not always happy to identify people physically in the street.
Yeah, one comment to that as well, and I think a big difference of that may be just the difference in laws. So privacy laws in the US are much more.
Can you hear him in the back?
Much. Can you hear me?
Make sure,
Yes.
make sure. I often sit in the back of the events and I don't hear anything.
Yeah, so I mean, privacy laws in Europe are a lot stricter, so companies can probably make less use of some of the data that is available to actually cross-correlate information. And in the US, there's even sharing between different companies possible, so it enables probably new innovative things that may not be possible in Europe.
Alain?
Yeah.
Sure.
So I want to add this comment, kind of tying up what Fred and Hubert have said, which is essentially hardware is free. You talked about web services. You can have a lot of machines, virtual machines, for very little money. Hardware to do geolocalization. All of this are little devices in your phones. All of that is free. So what's really valuable now is this new wave of innovation built on free platform, or close to free platform, is this ability of generating data, such as geolocalization or indoor and outdoor geolocalization. You have a whole trend of services, social services, having to do with what is called the quantified self. People wear little devices that measure how far you go and where you go. So it's a combination of GPS and pedometers and so on. And all of that data gets socially shared, essentially because hardware is free. You can start a company with very little money if you have an idea on how to use that information. And that, by the way, is Europe as well. So then you get into the legal legislation of what are the privacy laws and so on. But all of that hardware across the world is enabling that. The question is that big data. Big data is very different. Big data, in a nutshell, is how do you make sense of a tremendous. Let me back up. Before big data, there were structured databases, and people would mine these databases. Big data is mining unstructured data. So it's the torrent of data that's generated by the 800 million people on Facebook every day, the Twitch stream. That is big data. And how do you access that information and you make sense out of it? This is big data.
I think to illustrate big data, there's an easy example. For example, if you search for a restaurant, in 2000 you had to go on a website. Today you will go on Yelp, Yellow Pages, and you will read the comments. In the future, today, if you want, you can go to bundle.com. Bundle.com.
Say it slower.
Bundle, B-U-N-D-L-E.
Bundle.
Bundle, sorry. My French accent.
Très charmant.
So Bundle, you have 20 million credit cards from Citibank, and you have all the data. Of course, you don't know who is buying what. But for example, if you are looking for a restaurant and you want to know what is the price, today if you go to Yelp, they will tell you this is cheap, but what means cheap? If you are a student or if you are a billionaire from Facebook. If you know that if you have the average transaction of the last 10,000 transactions, and if for example it's a 1-star Michelin and restaurant and you see it's only $57, you would say, okay, this is cheap. but $57, it's a real data. So.
Okay, so which global innovations have had the most impact in the US and Europe in the last 5 years? Who wants to tackle that? Ilya?
I think the invention of the iPhone has one of the largest impact on the world, and we have seen that because it triggered the launch of Android, which is now the major mobile OS in the world. So
depends on who says.
I think
Is it really now?
now they crossed. I think they crossed 200 million this year. And so this is so obviously I wanted to say that for me the most disruptive area in the Silicon Valley is the mobile technology, you know. And on the second thing, I think the content delivery technology has the most impact on the world.
Example?
Netflix has 50% of the all US traffic. So so Steve Jobs reinvented how content is delivered, like whether it's music, movies, and Netflix too.
How about in Europe? What are they doing with that?
So the thing is, like Netflix is rumored to come in Europe. It's not yet there. There are different actually business models in Europe. I don't know them very well, but I know that in France you have the carrier, the operators. They have what they call the triple play. So they offer, you know, mobile, internet TV, broadcast TV. So they are the one who actually manage the content delivery system. That's for France. I think in Germany, same thing. T-Mobile also has the triple play offer. So maybe Frederick can tell us more about all the business model in Europe. But they don't have such a thing as Netflix, not yet.
No, not even the Somewhere brothers have ripped that off? Are you all familiar with the Somewhere brothers, the 3 Germans who are cloning everything? They did Groupon, Zappos, etc. I'm amazed that they haven't tried to.
I think the operators are looking at how they could do Netflix.
Yeah.
But they are looking into it. But I don't know how.
The content is Hollywood.
Yeah.
This
saying
is,
that
contract,
the content is Hollywood.
So just to add a small comment, as a small business, as a startup, the mobile revolution, what that brings to you is access to more than 1 billion customers instantly. So if you build an ad tomorrow that you can sell, you know, that adds enough value to sell for, you know, like $10, you can sell it to more than 1 billion people almost right away. And it's something that you never had before. Before that, you had to go through some kind of distribution channel, whether it is a wireless carrier or a store or something like that. And that's a game changer because now again, very small companies can do something that adds a lot of value. And I think that the recent acquisition of Instagram shows that in a very short time, a very simple idea can be worth $1 billion.
So just one more comment. I think one of the enablers for the iPhone and from the Android platform, the success that it provided was actually the availability of cheap bandwidth on mobile phone as well, or affordable bandwidth. And it was that for the internet, and it's the same on the mobile side as well. What will change though is that it will not remain as cheap as it was, especially in the US. Because if we had unlimited data plans, these days are over. The growth, for example, in the industry, the growth of network traffic going from mobile carriers is just growing at a rate that the carriers cannot build out quickly enough the networks.
Well, they're throttling already.
So they're throttling already, and it's going to get
worse.
it's gonna get worse. Yes. So it's going to be interesting how things are going to change.
So 2 comments. One is to the question, and I'll second what everybody has said. Is I mean, 5 years ago, and the innovation to me is the constant evolution of the quality of wireless communication, both in terms of bandwidth and speed. 5 years ago, it's very hard to remember that we didn't have all these Wi-Fi networks, and smartphone didn't exist. Period. On the data plan, I see a lot of these startups, and I can tell you that there are a lot of efforts on how to multiplex the bandwidth capability of all of these mobile networks, both on the bandwidth side and on the latency side. Latency is how long it takes for when you send a request for a web page to get the information back. You don't notice it on the laptop, on the desktop. On the cell phone, it's painfully slow, and it's a big hurdle. So there's a lot of work going on how to make better antennas, better radios, better protocol for transmission, and it's going to happen. You know, there's another thing about Silicon Valley. There's always a way by which barriers get essentially blown away by technology innovations.
Sorry.
I have a really loud voice, but so Frédéric, he works a lot. I've known Frédéric for quite a while. And so the question is, do we have to lead European companies into the 21st century? That's part A of 3 parts of the question. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's key to lead European companies into the 21st century. I was at the MIT in Boston, it was 2 months ago, and I met Andrew McAfee. Andrew McAfee is a teacher at the MIT. And he told me that we are just at the beginning of the internet revolution. We think that internet is a huge revolution, but for the moment it's very small. It's only 3% of the gross net product at a global level, so we are just at the beginning. For example, at the MIT, they think that in 20 years, 100% of the economy will be fully digital. So for example, when you are a farmer in Africa today, if you want to sell a cow, in a market, you will use your mobile phone to know what is the best price, when and where you will sell the cow. So it means that cow in Africa, the agriculture is becoming digital, and it's just at the beginning. So it means that industries, agriculture, everything will become digital, and it's key for companies. And I think that the future is not pure player, internet pure player. We think that, okay, the future is Facebook, Amazon. Yes, of course it's the future, but for a very small part of the economy, the future is traditional companies, but they will operate digitally.
Well, tell them also about the meeting, without giving names, of some European politicians, what they thought of that idea.
I think that for the moment, it's very difficult for European politicians to understand that the economy will be fully digital. At the moment, they think that we can keep the business as usual, but I really think that the future is for traditional companies embracing technology.
So the question is like, what are the difference between European and...
No, the question was, do we have to lead European companies into the 21st century? Or are they going to get there sometime soon?
Well, I think to some extent they are, because if you look at the healthcare, for example, we had smart chips since 10 years in Europe with the healthcare system. So
what are they? Explain to people who don't know.
also we have a healthcare. So in Europe in general, the healthcare system is managed mostly by the government. And since 10 years in France, I don't know about Germany, but all our health information are carried in a smart chip. And when we go to the doctor or the hospital or the pharmacist, we just give the card and everything is saved in this card. And all the the IT system are connected. So that's an example, but I think it depends on how the business is done in which area. So it's not about being capable or not of innovation. It's about, it's a different way of doing business. So the thing is, here in the Silicon Valley, the innovation is faster because there is much more investment, private investment. And also the way the business is done in the US is a bit different. So we can explain that with different cultural codes. But I think it's the honest question.
Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I actually very much agree that there's innovation happening in both in Europe and in the US and the Bay Area, but probably in different areas. And in different ways. And I think one of the different ways is that here it's very much about speed and high risk. And in Europe, it's more about more midterm and long-term focus, and it builds just different types of companies. So it seems that in Germany, it's the sort of the Mittelstand, the sort of mid-sized companies that are doing still very well, and that's the strength that, for example, Germany has. That is less so in the US. It's more about disruptive companies. It's about big companies or very small ones, but sort of the mid-sized companies seem to be less prevalent.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
I can add something on that. Definitely, there's a difference in mindset. Silicon Valley is about failing fast, failing very fast as you can, and there's no penalty for failing. Whereas Europe is very different. In fact, specifically in France, there's still, it's getting better, but there's still a penalty for failing. So it's rather better not to try anything rather than try and fail. And then the startup that I'm aware of in Europe are a lot of ideas, extremely innovative, especially in the hard sciences, that are excerpted out of national labs that are funded by a combination of grants and government money. There's very little venture capital for that type of activity. So that's the fundamental difference. And then of course, over the years, over the last 70 years or so, Silicon Valley, I mean, the core competency in Silicon Valley is not about the innovation and the technology, because it's been multiple cycles of all kinds of technology. The core competency in Silicon Valley is the knowledge of how to build companies. And it's very different than if you're building a software company or a hardware company or a biomed company. It almost doesn't matter. There is a model on how to build these companies. And that doesn't exist. Well, that's not true. It exists somewhere else. It's just not quite as mature and vibrant as it is here.
Anyone in the audience have a question? Sure.
Nobody's talked about talent pool.
Please, ask a question.
That's the question, because I think
Yeah.
sometimes we forget there are people at the heart of all of this.
Oh, absolutely.
And so the international talent pool that's been drawn to the Valley, and that is here in the Valley from around the world, is a very key mix of what makes the technology, the business, and why this group is even here in the first place.
Right. So that's if everybody has heard the comment, I'm not going to repeat it. The only comment I would add to that is that specifically in the last few years, with software companies and web-based companies and social media and so on, there is talent everywhere. So you start seeing New York community, and you can start seeing Austin, and you can start seeing places, Europe and China, where people don't necessarily have to move anywhere anymore. They can use the global Amazon Web Services from anywhere they are. So that's a little bit of a difference, that's an evolution. But up until recently, the magnet of Silicon Valley for talent was because of its company building knowledge.
I just want to add a little comment on top of that is, having the talent is one thing, having the individual talent is one thing, but what's amazing here is the ability of those groups to work as a team. And when you get a team of 200, 300, 400, 1,000 people, it's very hard to make them work in an effective way. And here in Silicon Valley, they found a way to make that work, and to make that work very effectively. So
you're going up another step, and you're looking at the next level of what talent pool is about, is the institutional structures that allow that talent to blend, collaborate, and what this gentleman was talking about, even fail, and then come back again with another idea.
Exactly, yeah. And some of that is, in my opinion, structural, and a lot of it is also a mindset, and we'll probably get.
But I think some of it, I work with quite a lot of startups, and it's definitely happening in Brazil, where people are just, especially the younger generation, is getting together and really putting together successful companies. They have a huge market, Brazil. It's definitely happening in Russia. I work with a lot of Russians, they're successful there, they're successful here. So the talent pools, thank goodness, of all the countries, I think, are coming together to create companies that are viable. So the other question is, what are the 2 to 3 distinct, since many people are doing leadership here, what do you think are the 2 to 3 distinct differences between European and US business leaders?
So I think Europeans are more top-down decision makers. Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yes.
When I came here, I was amazed how when a company had some challenges, they ask the whole company to give ideas. Never happened in Europe. Never. So that's.
Will it happen with the next generation?
Yeah, why not? Maybe want to build bridges between the Silicon. I think it's very Silicon Valley. I'm not sure if East Coast, the oil industry or financial industry, they behave like that. It's very Silicon Valley centric.
Finance, I think we doubt it.
I don't know. I can ask you.
Yes, that's right. These banks.
The Apple, Steve Jobs.
Yeah, Apple is the exception, isn't it?
Well, I don't know.
It's supposed to be very
But Apple is
hierarchical.
different. They don't do the PR like any other company as well. It's called censorship. And yeah, another one, I think here the U.S. leaders, especially in the Silicon Valley, they know they are better at aligning the interest of the employees with the interest of the company. Like when you see like companies like Zynga, for example, so they retain their talent by offering big, large rewards when they do their IPO, for example.
Yeah, but I wouldn't exactly give Zynga as a model. If I think about how the CEO took away the bonuses and other stuff from their employees, I don't know if that's such a...
Well, to be fair, I think that if you look at Zynga, it was a relatively few number of people who were concerned by that, and overall, it's probably much better to be the average person or employee at Zynga today or like in a few months than being the average employee in a random European startup.
Yeah. We won't name the companies, right? Robert, did you have a...
So I have a little mic now.
Okay. You have your own mic? Oh my God. There
At least
you
not
go.
working very much.
That's good.
What strikes me is that for the longest time, and it's still the case, but it's changing across the world, for the longest time, Silicon Valley is a true meritocracy. And one of the best examples is Facebook and some of the companies like this where they have this codathon, okay? And a codathon is, you're given a problem and you have 24 hours, 36 hours, 48 hours to kind of write code day and night with pizza and Red Bull, and it doesn't matter where you come from. They don't care. So it's the ultimate walk-in. You walk in if you know how to code, whatever, and you have a problem, and that's what matters. Whereas so there's a lot less, and it's true pretty much in the other area of the industries as well, where what matters is, are you able to deliver what you're supposed to deliver as part of a team, being a code engineer on an app side or a mechanical engineer on a piece of hardware. And then of course you build reputation and you build people that you know, and that's why this community kind of keep growing because of the meritocracy system. And it's changing a little bit because now we have the rest of the world that's learning how to get educated, especially with online education. And so you have talent pretty much everywhere, but not enough of a critical density of talent the way we have in Silicon Valley. Very different in Europe, where Europe is much more of a, as Alian said, top-down decision-making, but also a very hierarchical. It really matters what school you went to, what profile you have in terms of education before people will consider you for a job.
Here or there?
There.
Also, I wonder how much is company culture versus region culture. So if you compare Facebook with Cisco, Cisco would probably fall into what
The European company.
as European model.
Yeah.
So,
But Cisco in the early days was not the same way. So there's also a kind of size and
Well,
time.
neither was Microsoft.
That's right. That's right.
They all seem to change and adopt that model. after a while.
Maybe it's a parallel for the older the culture,
Yeah.
both countries and companies. The older the culture, the older the company, you get into a mindset which is a little more hierarchical, a little more stagnant, as opposed to the fast-moving early cultures and early companies.
And don't forget that the early people also tend to leave the company
Yeah.
as it changes and as it gets bigger. So that culture moves on with them to something new.
So that we don't appear to be drinking our own Kool-Aid, which those of you from Silicon Valley know what that is. I know there are lots of good things that Europeans do too, have innovations. Can you think of some, besides what you said with the healthcare, that especially things that should come over to the United States? I'm thinking of clean and energy and tech and things like that from Germany. Why isn't America as advanced as Germany is, if that's correct? You know the answer, she knows the answer.
Well, I was at a conference about
Yeah, that's right, you were just there.
So the reason why it's working very well in Germany is because the government was very implicated in actually driving the laws to make that happen. So that's why, and the same thing for the healthcare. It's really it's driven also by the government, the will of the government to actually lead the way for the innovation. I'm thinking also about the smart cities. I think in Europe they are more advanced because they have to.
Explain smart city.
So smart city is basically the ability of a city to be more smart with the usage of sensors. Like in buses in Paris, you can have all the the timing, everything, or also I think they have a project to deploy like cars, like a zip car, but at the city level, like the Velib, or in Barcelona, they started with the availability of bicycles everywhere. But because European cities, they need that much more because they cannot afford to have only cars. So they are much more advanced in all these technologies because they have to.
So that falls for me in the category of either social innovation or business model innovation. The German government example of subsidizing solar was really a business model innovation to be able to, the original purpose was to create jobs and bring in technology. Germany did not innovate mostly on the technology of solar cell. They innovated on how to get large amount of solar cells deployed and at a cost that was.
So where did they get the solar cells from?
They brought it from pretty much, they came in from, what they were able to do is create some companies to manufacture solar cells. It's not very difficult to manufacture solar cells, the Chinese have demonstrated. Not difficult at all. But you had to have, it was completely uneconomical to do so until the business innovation of the German government put in place. On the technology innovation side, I think you have to look at the northern country of Sweden, Norway, Finland for telephony and Nokia. These were really innovators at one point in terms of really true technology for telecommunication.
No, I think that our friends kind of said it all. I was thinking that I agree with Eliane. It's there was a lot of like social engineering in what Germany did with the green industry, but it's not actually like a technological innovation. It was more of a social business innovation.
I think another area would be key in the future. It's water. I think that today we speak about the oil peak, but in fact the fuel, the petroleum in the future will be water. I think that it will be key for people in the future, and European companies are very good at filtering water. So I think it's a key innovation in the future.
Any questions for the audience? Yes?
So I'd like to ask a prescriptive question rather than a diagnostic one. So two patterns we've been noticing in Silicon Valley is one is the willingness to share information through the exchange. The second is also willingness to take risks, of failing fast, as you said. Can those be exported or imported, depending on the perspective? And how would you do that?
So, for example, at l'atelier, we are working with the French consulate, and we are trying to have students from French schools to spend at least 4 or 5 months in a startup in Silicon Valley. Because I think that the best way to change Europe is to change the mind of the students, the next generation. If they understand how to make business, how to share ideas, how to take risks, how to fail, and to succeed. I think that this will improve a lot in Europe. For me, the best way is internship in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, I think that could be a very slow process because in Silicon Valley what happened is it's not something that you can spread out easily. The culture that's been built here has been built by accretion of like-minded people who kept coming in because they lacked the idea of that culture. And so if you want to spread that out, it's much more difficult than creating like a group that's going to grow organically. And so yeah, I'd love to see how that's going to be done. If you ask like that, I'd say my answer would be it seems pretty tough.
Yeah, and I think that's where culture comes in as well. And fail fast, fail often. And I think the permission to fail is something that is very ingrained in Silicon Valley. And then from my background in Europe, I haven't really seen. So it goes to what do you learn in school, what do you learn in university, and do you have an environment, including business and investment environment, that gives you permission to fail. And it's perhaps coming, perhaps with the Sandler brothers in Germany, where there's a lot of activity in Berlin. Yes, they're doing copycat, but they learn as well, and there's a new sense of doing something in a different way coming in Germany, and it seems to create a lot of excitement. So perhaps there's a kernel of something that may work in Germany.
I agree with that. That's how it starts. You need mavericks. You need mavericks that really don't care. They want to live in Germany, they want to live in France, they want to live in, well, let's leave it at that. And they are doing, they're essentially going by their own drummer. And they create their own companies, they come here, they visit, they get educated through these internships, and a few of them start and they just do it because they don't really care what anybody else thinks.
I think it's happening in Germany, Berlin. I've heard that a lot of VC money investment is going to Berlin, and there is a startup community that is being built right now. So maybe that's where they can grow the German Silicon Valley, I guess.
What I heard, and maybe some of you were there, that when the German Silicon Valley Accelerator opened, they say a lot of VCs didn't want to invest in German companies because they're ready to sell. 20 million, 50 million will sell the company. That they don't have that mindset yet from here that it has to be a lot bigger. I don't know, do you agree with that? Or have you heard anything?
There's a problem of fragmentation of the market in Europe.
That's a big problem too because of the different languages. Comparing Europe to US, million by million of inhabitants, it doesn't make any sense because the big problem when you set up a business in Europe is you have to deal with fragmentation of languages and distribution channels. Mm-hmm. And so for the same result as in the US, you have to spend much more money and energy. That's also a big challenge. So maybe it's reducing some businesses that use the web, or if your technology is only online, maybe it's different. But still, you still have to translate. You still have, and we are advertising based, and for example, the ad networks, they are so fragmented in Europe compared to the United States.
This gentleman over here had the first question.
What effect has the labor laws in France and Germany, that fail quickly? Isn't it kind of difficult to start a company and have it collapse and start another one and not be sued?
He was saying, what are the effects of the labor laws that you can't just start a company, fail, what happens to the people you employed?
So I'll answer that. Because I've seen this on both sides. As I said, I was in a real business before I had this job here, but it's a non-starter. It's a non-starter. I was an executive in a company that had offices in Europe, and shutting down a company in France takes 2.5 years to still get sued, and it's nigh impossible. So what's happening today is that you have the startups are in London, and people commute to the channel. And they live in Paris, and they take the train an hour and a half, they get in London, they spend a couple of days, they come back. It's exactly because of that. So it's a non-starter.
Could you speak to like the intra-Europe versus extra-Europe? Is there more stimulation and energy and ideas between the European states, if I may say, or nations, and as opposed to the globalization, the pressure of globalization, particularly from Silicon Valley? In other words, you deal more with European problems than you do with problems caused by the innovations of Silicon Valley? Or is that not true? Is it really all globalization that's driving people?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Which is a greater force intra-European cooperation or globalization?
So in their companies, do they interact with each other more, or they have to see it globally?
For me, it's a question of mindset. I think that, for example, the French entrepreneur will try to be a French leader, on after a European leader, on after a global leader. When I meet a company in Silicon Valley, when a 20 years guy will tell me, I want to be a global leader now, starting tomorrow.
And you know, that's so funny. Did you point that out the other day? Or someone who was Spanish. It's so funny when you talk to Spaniards or other Europeans, they won't talk about their companies. They'll talk about mi proyecto. You know, le projet que j'ai. They don't say the company. They'll talk about the project. And that's hilarious, because that's really the difference. How do you think of a company and a startup as a company, not a project? Did you point that out to me? Yeah, thanks. So I'm regurgitating his stuff. André?
Yeah, so going back to the culture of Silicon Valley and the idea of doing internships, etc. I think I have kids here, and I was myself in the French, German, and U.S. Educational system. And what I noticed is that kids here, at least all my kids and their friends, they learn by playing. So I'm in the gaming space. You learn to script your own game when you're 8 or 9 years old. And you do this because you have immediate feedback. You have, there's a game called Minecraft, Roblox, that are incredibly successful. And the kids, they don't go through classes and etc. It's just about, I'm going to script my game, people are going to come and visit me. And they're 9, 10, 11-year-old, and they're in the heart of Silicon Valley. So they gather at school, they create a little project, they create their game, they create a little social app, and they go for it. And I think that is unbelievable, and it's not something that you teach people because they have fun doing it, but what you do is you facilitate it. So there are computers at school, you can use it for 2 hours, you can use those programs. And I don't know, I've left Europe quite a while ago, but I think that is when we talk about teaming, partnerships, working together, kids do it when they're 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, but at least in the Bay Area. After that, it's just, it's my DNA. So, I think, I don't know how it works in Europe, is there somebody has an experience about this, but here people learn by playing and having fun.
I agree with you. For example, at school, my kids are using iPad, which is very unusual in Europe.
Well, his children are at the French-American school. Yeah.
Coming back to bridges between Europe and Silicon Valley and spreading the Silicon Valley entrepreneurial spirit, and also knowing that we go into a digital and global world where, despite what you say about Europe, people younger than me, so the X, Y, and Z groups of young are coming in companies in the next years. They start to have the same attitudes, digital, using games, social networks. So how about a social network, much more entrepreneurial organized, like a Facebook, but which would be structured around the entrepreneurial spirit, with an entry fee, with a global action that allows everybody around the world that is an entrepreneurial guy to participate to that without needing to move here, but still taking advantage with an entry fee, so it can be a very lucrative business. What do you think about that?
Good
Are
idea.
you pitching? He wants to pitch.
Elevator.
We have everybody around the table here, even venture capital.
What do you think, Alain? You're the VC.
I agree with you. If you do it freemium, I think it's good.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you say, Alain?
No, this is how it starts. It's exactly how it starts. And you have people here all the time talking like we are, and an idea, and there's a little brainstorming, and people say, well, let's do it. Yeah. And as we mentioned earlier today, hardware is free, it takes nothing. You just register a website, you write a few lines of code, so that you have kind of, when people land onto the landing page, they see something, but you don't have to buy any hardware. Everything is up in the cloud. So, and then you know really quickly, you get people to come or not. In fact, you know, right now there's a lot of, you know, there's a book by Eric Ries, which is called, I forget what it's called.
Lean Startup.
Lean Startup, right? It's this idea of, you try it. Just stop talking, do it. In a week, you can have something up and running, and either it's working or it's not working. If it's not working, you try to understand why. You modify it and you do it again. And so it's these cycles of learning that you go very, 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 very fast without spending a lot of money, and it's just time and energy. Do it.
And really start being the case for developers, but certainly not about leadership, management methods, investment, grouping people through ideas, using social principles, sustainable development of the business, stuff like that.
That comes
Don't
later.
exist yet.
That comes later. This is why they put Sheryl Sandberg with Mark Zuckerberg. That comes later. Once you start having a lot of people coming, you know, to your website, a lot of users for whatever product or service that you have an idea, then you start to worry about, wow, what are we going to do about everything you said about? So then you go look for people that are experienced, and you don't have to reinvent everything. The kernel of the idea originally is what matters. But people, you know, as I said, people are not deterred by, you know, leaving this room and saying, okay, let's go finish the night and we'll just start coding. They do that. That's mine.
You can code.
You still have to show up at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning.
So the other question is, what are the main skills you need today as a global leader? Especially since many of the guests here to Silicon Valley are doing leadership. In your opinion, what skill set do you need to be a global leader? How do you adapt your style from local to global? Any ideas?
For me, the biggest challenge is not leadership style to local versus global. I think that it's mainly from a young generation to old generation. I think that today it's key to understand the digital native generation or the digital immigrant generation. I think that it's a huge challenge to understand the...
So we're the immigrants and your kids are the natives.
Yes. So I think that this is the biggest challenge, much more that local, global. I used to work in Spain, in UK, Italy, France, and in the US, and in China. And for me, the biggest challenge is a generation challenge.
Can you explain a little more? Why? Why is that a challenge?
I think because it's a real new generation. I think I think, for example, when we look at revolutions in Northern Africa, for example, the recent revolution in Egypt, Tunisia, it's mainly a revolution about generation. So it's a new generation. It's in this country, people are very young. They use mobile, they use social networks. They are skilled, educated, and they change the government. They change everything. So I think that we don't see that in our countries because the average age in our countries are still mainly digital immigrant, people that didn't know internet on mobile when they were born. But now the next generation, they understand that perfectly, and they will revolution the way we manage people, they will revolution the way we buy products, and also the way we govern countries.
So we have we do business both in Europe and in the United States. And for me, the challenge is to change cultural code when you do business here or in Europe. You have to change your code.
Example?
I don't know, for example, so I signed a contract with an ad network in Europe. And then I said, oh yeah, let's partner and do an event, and we invite journalists, bloggers, startup entrepreneurs, and the first reaction was, no, we don't do that like that here.
Why not?
I said, why? It's impossible. So, because at that time in France, they didn't want to mix journalists and bloggers together, and it was happening here. So it's a code. It's just I didn't know the code, So that's one example.
Did they end up doing it or not?
Yeah, but I had to separate.
Did you have to seat them separately?
No, I had to do breakfast, press breakfast for the journalists, and then the event with the bloggers and the entrepreneurs. So that's an example. Another example is the difference, how also networking events in Europe and in the US are different. The time you spend to discuss a partnership is different. A lot of things are different. And so, yeah, you have to know the code, you have to learn them, I think. If you really want, if you have to do operational business in different countries. If you are not on the operation side, that's okay. But and I think European codes and American codes sometimes are opposite. They are not just different. Sometimes they are opposite. Like no, I don't have a real example right now.
Like being, like showing who's the boss might be a very European thing, or it's something that you see on average a little more often. Showing who's the boss, showing who's important. Well, maybe here on average, maybe the execs or the CEOs are more willing to put, the employees in the spotlight, and or at least say thank you when they did a good job, and be a little more approachable and more. Actually, if you're trying to contact a C-level executive from a big company, yeah, I think that you are thinking about that. They will reply usually in 24 hours. Here, yes, because it's a professional thing to do. It shows that they care, that they work hard. If you in Europe, it's a little different. People tend to reply maybe in a week, and sometimes they do it because to show that they're important, that they're busy, or that you're not important. So it's a different relationship.
So it's the opposite. Here to show that you don't want to miss an opportunity and you work hard when you are at sea level, you have to reply in less than 48 hours. In Europe, when you are at a sea level, to show how important you are not available. So it's a very good example of cultural codes that are totally opposite. I don't know if you agree with that, but
I would completely.
So don't take it personally. It's just a code thing. just wait your week and then things will get.
For example, the value of a yes in the US is a real yes. Yes in Europe is maybe, and yes in Asia is really depends on the country.
Okay, so how do people become more global? What skills? How do people learn that? I mean, in Europeans, they can't continue on this way. It will. How do you learn to be global?
By necessity. It's true. People don't like to change unless they have to. At some point, if those who don't go global, those who don't build those skills, they will get in trouble at some point. And there's a lot of examples. I guess I don't want to cite any names because it's not nice. But
that's okay. Let's not be nice. That's okay.
There are companies.
No tweeting, okay?
Just video recording.
Yes, we have 3 cameras, no less.
But basically the idea of doing business as usual, even when the world is changing under your feet, is not a recipe that works typically. And just to take one example, we work in the media industry. And if you look at, for example, some media outlets that have been there for 100 years, what they want today, really, is for the internet to disappear. Right? Unfortunately, it's not very pragmatic. So if you don't want to evolve, then trouble eventually will catch you.
This was the monk's position in 1456. after Gutenberg. The printing press, yeah.
So Robert, what do you think? You were saying that Mittelstand, the mid-sized company in Germany, is still doing its way. Are they going to be passed over? Are they going to lose out in the end if they don't?
Well,
digitally?
Well, not necessarily. It was actually from somebody that I heard that went over to Europe to negotiate business contracts. and he thought, or he said, or
I'm sorry, who did?
it was a quote that I heard from
Okay,
somebody who went
got
to Europe for business negotiations, and he said he hates negotiating with these specialized Mittelstand type of German companies because they're mostly family run, they're mostly high tech, they have something very unique to offer that nobody else has, and they don't sacrifice a short-term win just for the next quarter to make their numbers for just a cheaper price. And with that in mind, I think if they continue to be at the leading edge and have technology that is very difficult to replicate, they will continue to do actually well with that strategy.
So we have someone here named Cyril who's working for Bosch Ventures. Where are you? So what do you think of that? You are representing a family-run company, which is apparently it has expanded because you're doing Bosch Ventures, which is amazing. I just met him a couple of days ago.
Well,
What's your
family-run, I
opinion?
mean, by now it's 125 years old and 300,000 people worldwide. So I don't. It eventually was.
But it's not public.
No,
it's
not
still
public.
family.
No, it's not family. It's owned by a foundation, but it's not public. And from that point of view, it has expanded and it has grown at a constant rate of 5 to 6% annually. But it is very much to what you said, Robert. It is very much high technology based on German engineering, etc. And that's kind of the foundation of the company. And being private, it can actually have this long-term view on things of not sacrificing this long-term view for short-term shareholder value increase. But that's one example, and I don't know. The problem is that in Germany, it's not a problem, but it's just a mindset that, and same also in Switzerland, it's not the number of startups that are started, it's just they don't expand as much. People just want to build a small business which sustains them and a couple of people around them with a high technology, but it's not this mindset of really going for the big thing.
Is that bad?
Nope.
In itself?
Nope. It's not.
It's just different.
Is that called lifestyle business? It's perfect.
It's nearly a derogatory term over here.
In the valley, it is, yeah, because in the valley, people are about changing the world and completely disrupting the rest of the world, right? So there's a huge difference, but no, these are good businesses.
But investment don't go into lifestyle businesses.
Venture capital doesn't.
You divest immediately, so there's
Right.
a dichotomy here. I think on the angel side, you may get trapped into a lifestyle business and you never get a liquidity event.
Give me an example of a lifestyle business. The dating business, for example?
No,
it's a lifestyle business.
Everything that is capitalized institutionally is not a lifestyle business unless people want to get out and share and sell their shares.
The example on your guy is, for example, I could have a small business making watches, very precise precision watches, and I have 10 employees. And it's a good business, it's growing nicely, everybody's making a great living, and we have and that's a lifestyle business. But, that's one of the discussion that I have very often with entrepreneurs, is that not every business is venture capital business. No. Absolutely not. And the only reason you take venture capital is because you want to grow the business extremely fast, which means you want to take a huge company as fast as you can. But otherwise, venture capital money is extremely expensive capital. Because it's equity. So,
well, we've seen the emergence over the last 10 years or more of companies who have chosen to grow organically.
That's right.
And in fact generate revenue, generate jobs, but not necessarily become Facebook
right.
or a Cisco.
That's right.
And that's not always, the $1 billion deal.
Do they get bought, or do they just plod along happily and keep going?
And they may plod, and there are, I would say here in Silicon Valley, there are about 12,000 technology companies. Mm-hmm. The overwhelming number are under 100 employees. Some are doing quite well, thank you very much. Others fail, some get acquired, but you have many stories here in the Naked City.
If you step back,
big boomers.
venture capital is just a different form of money management. It's capital management. We aggregate capital, we deploy capital, and in the middle is choosing where to deploy capital so that we generate outsized returns. And the emphasis is on outsized returns. That's what venture capital is technically about. So you have to really think and invest in companies that have very large potential. So that's the category of business investing. But there's, like you said, countless of companies that don't really need venture capital are doing just fine.
Yeah. I was just going to mention, I can't remember the case studies themselves because it's been long ago, but there's a great book called Little Giants, which is actually a book about, it's a bunch of case studies of small businesses that have decided to consciously stay small because those are lifestyle businesses.
What years are we talking about?
I think the book is about maybe 12, 13, so it's been a while. But Wells Fargo on a bigger scale was actually using that model. They decided to consciously stay regional, and that was a very successful strategy for a very long time.
I like the word was. Yeah, I own their shares. They're not great.
Not so much now, yes.
And talking about culture difference, it just dawned on me that companies like Bosch, and there's countless companies like this in Germany, in France, in Switzerland. The biggest challenge with these small businesses is succession challenge. You have a founder, and they run the business for 25 years, and then what happens? So in the U.S., there's been a whole business, mostly private equity, Bain Capital, among others, that look at these businesses and buy them out as a succession mechanism for the founders, because nobody in the family is interested. Whereas in Europe, a lot of these businesses for the first 75 years, third, fourth generation, taking over until it becomes like Bosch, maybe completely institutionalized. But that's a very strong cultural difference here.
Yeah.
So what do you think are some major future global trends? And how do you think you can position yourself and your company to recognize them ahead of time? Which is always the hard question around here.
For example, in the banking industry, it would be mobile payment. I think that the future is virtual money, and this would be a key for our sector.
Well, something for me is like the way people will be connected with each other. Like we have seen that in the Arab Spring, what Facebook and the mobile changed, the revolution and the way people engage in politics, for example.
In what way will they engage in politics? Let's take the Arab Spring and
or the Obama campaign also. Like it's a mix of like content delivery across all platforms, accessible everywhere, in real time. That's it.
I even heard that in the Sarkozy or Hollande election, people were tweeting, and there was something illegal about it, so they had to invent names. Explain that. Why? I don't know.
You're not allowed to make any pronouncement about who's going to win or what the result of the polling will be.
Wouldn't that be great if that existed in the U.S.? Wow. So they tweeted each other, they gave them nicknames. They gave Sarkozy a nickname and Hollande a nickname, and then they sent each other tweets, which I think is brilliant. That's kind of a sign of the...
So I had all the same example as you gave about how mobile disrupted the way people do business in the emerging country, like knowing the crop pricing changed totally the way they did business, or also the access to health information in Africa, for example, or remote areas. So it's so that's the other trends, I think.
So there's three things that are happening right now, which I think can merge over 5 to 10 years, we're seeing sooner. And that's one trend, which is the what they call the Internet of Things. So it's things that are connected with lots of devices and lots of sensors. The other one is the big data, which is collecting lots of data and making sense out of it. And the other one is just healthcare, and how inefficient and ridiculous it actually is.
Here.
And here.
And the Supreme Court may be destroying.
And perhaps not just here. So I can foresee that you have always connected sensors that are with you that inform a system constantly what's happening with you, what's your blood sugar level, what's your heart rate, what's going through your body. And then with an expertise system that actually tells you and warns you what's happening with you or what's wrong with you before you even have to go to a doctor. Because frankly, going to a doctor for a 10-minute visit gives you just time to explain things, gives the doctor not enough time to even make a proper diagnosis. If you have all that data, you can probably get a much better diagnosis from a computer than you will ever get with a 10-minute visit, perhaps with the wrong doctor, with the wrong expertise.
When do you see that coming? And you see it coming here or in
Well,
Europe?
the seats are set. I think there's going to be a timing. My prediction is always
No, it's okay.
tough, but 5-10 years, I think something is going to happen that combines these things and just provides much better healthcare with fewer doctors. And cheaper. Yes.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot of behavioral changes as for where people are going to get their information. So in the old model, you would have a few large entities, getting all the eyeballs. But in the future, between more devices, more places like websites and things like that where people want to go. For example, a media company like the one we run will have to project its content outside of our own domain.
What do you mean by that?
Well, for example, it would be foolish to think that 1 billion people every day would go to ubergizmo.com to look at the tech news. Because people have different habits. They will go into different places, and maybe at any given moment in time they might be elsewhere. And what we need and want to do is to follow them where they are. So we need to project that content, we need to syndicate the content, and think a little outside of the bringing people to me. I need to go to them. I'm not sure which business you're in, but you'll probably have to face the same issue at some point. So keep an eye on that.
So I'll just add something on what you were saying about medical. It's happening to a small scale already. There is a IBM machine called Watson, the most famous because it won the Jeopardy game. So they have a program with Children's Hospital in Boston to use one of the Watson machines to be able to help radiologists read radios, X-ray scans, and MRI scans and so on, to be able to essentially supplement the human vision and the human brain to detect anomalies in these measurements, and machines can do that so much better. And so it's happening at some level, and I could really agree. In fact, I completely agree with what everybody said. It's hard for me at the end of the line to think about something different. But one thing that would suggest is that we're already seeing a completely different definition of what influence and credibility is. And it's extremely important because it's turning the social world completely on its head. It used to be, even recently, Walter Cronkite. If Walter Cronkite on the U.S. news, for those of you who don't know the equivalent, I don't know what the equivalent would be in German and French, maybe PPDA in France. But if it was on the news and Cronkite would say, people would believe it. Today, if Justin Bieber tweets about something, 25 million people believe it. Okay? And it's really powerful in some ways, and it's really dangerous in other ways. But it's the reality of what we are. The credibility is now associated with these Gen X, these young persons that give more credibility to what Lady Gaga would say than a journalist on a CNN show, and has some tremendous implications.
And that seems to be worldwide, no?
Oh yes.
Any questions from you, unless I follow on? Go ahead.
About technological waves in the next years, I would like to know what do you think about the Internet of Things and about augmented reality?
I think
for me, augmented reality is nice, but I don't think that there's a major trend in the future. Maybe there are many things like diminished reality. For example, if you don't want to see any cakes in pastry shop, you can have diminished reality in the future. But for me, it's more an anecdote. I think that for me, Internet of Things, it's a big trend, especially connected with big data.
For augmented reality, actually, I see a lot of demo of augmented reality, all kinds of them. I think right now the quality of the rendering is not there yet, so it's not really a reality. And it's same thing, the site Second Life. So it's a 3D, immersive experience. It doesn't work because the user experience is not there yet. But I think today the technology will be able to have a great user experience using like 3D rendering or whatever. And then I think people are going to use it. I'm thinking about Kinect, for example. You know what is Kinect? So it allows, so you can have a gesture interface with your TV or your computer, and it can allow people, for example, to buy clothing. Say some people they are in a village in the mountains and they don't have access to Macy's, and they could with Kinect they could like try on clothing. Now the quality of the experience is very poor, but I bet that in 5 years it could be way better. So I think, some stuff will happen. When, I don't know exactly, but depends on really all the factors of user experience.
So do you think there is an interest?
Yeah, I think there is an interest right now. It's starting to happen with like Kinect, with like better networks. The problem of the networks, like, it will cost more money, I think, to be connected and to transfer all this 3D real-time data. But I don't know when they will have the right quality that the majority of people would like to use it. For example, Second Life, nobody use it because a regular website, regular e-commerce website has a better user experience than going to Second Life, going in a 3D shop. The experience is not pleasing to people.
I think of augmented reality, especially when it comes to this kind of experience. It's a feature. It's not an app or an experience itself. So there is something that is going to come which really uses that as a feature, which is really value. I don't know what it is, but I just think of it as a feature of an enabler, but not of something that it's in itself has value.
So about augmented reality, I think that the main added value is that you get relevant information about what you're looking at. And today, the main issue with augmented reality is that the computer has no idea what you're looking at. If I had some glasses only, it wouldn't know that this is a glass, and it would definitely not know that this is a microphone.
So how is Google goggles supposed or Google glasses
well,
supposed to work?
the way that we look at that today is we try to build huge databases of objects and photos and try to kind of match it the way we can. But if you look at, for example, a kid that's 3 years old, you show the kid a glass, and if you show a different glass with a completely different shape and color, it will know, oh, that's a glass. Right. And we can't get the computer to do that. So as long as the computer doesn't know what you're looking at, it's very hard for it to give you relevant information about it.
That's why my question, because if we agree that Internet of Things is a real wave, in 10 to 20 years, Internet of Things will make that the computer will know that this is a glass and identify it.
As long as the glass has an IP address, yes. But if it doesn't have an IP address, you might know.
Well, 10 to 20 years, many objects will have an identification, and then the computer will be able to identify even on the glasses.
You have a few ways to solve that problem. I think that the Internet of Things will happen. It's unavoidable because computing is getting extremely cheap. So you will be able to put a microprocessor in anything. So that's not an issue. How you solve the AR issue is different. Like for example, let's say I have this has an IP address, but what happens if I look at the photo with a glass in it? Maybe I want to know, oh, was that the glass of Steve McQueen or someone famous? And then at that point you're back to square one. The computer doesn't know what it is. So it's a very tough problem to solve. We've been working at it for 30 years. We don't know when that's going to happen. And that's the reality that most people don't want you to know.
Okay, I have a couple more. And one was, if you had to start all over again, let's say there are people here not from Silicon Valley or the United States, what are some of the things that you would avoid doing? So what are the things that you would tell people? I screwed up here, I shouldn't have, or I should maybe have done this better, or...
I should have invested in some companies.
I should have bought Amazon 10 years ago.
Okay, you don't have to do the negative, let's be American. In the positive, what would you do over again that really worked?
As an Amazon, right? What about Amazon?
Well, I'm still trying to
Yeah,
answer
you
the
can
first
do
one.
that. I was trying to raise the level.
If you come from Europe and you come here, in most cases, you can come via a visa, and then you will try to go for your green card. Take control over that process as early as you can, because it's a royal pain in the ass, and the company who sponsors your green card is not necessarily sponsoring your interest. So take charge of that process is the best advice that you can give for anybody who comes over here and would like to stay here.
Yeah, that's a definitely very pragmatic issue that a lot of people don't realize, at least in the first few years, and then when they're in the pinch, they're starting to scramble. I think that if I had to do something again, the best decision that I've taken in my life is probably to work on what I like, work on what I love, and at least for me, that was the thing that made my professional life totally worth it.
Anna, what about you? Going over, as they say, to the dark side.
Dark side.
Why do they call it that? All the VCs always sit at the table and say, before I went over to the dark side, I was such and
I never
such.
said that.
Why is it the dark? You don't say that. But why do they always say that? What's so dark?
I said I had a real job before.
You didn't say that.
You know, I think I'll tell you why people say that. It's because there's a lot of perceptions out there that some of them are true and some of them are not, but perception and perception. And there is this kind of antagonism between entrepreneurs and the people with the money, but it's completely wrong in general.
Of course.
Why did I do that? I did that because, for the same reason, the two persons here at Gizmo get to see all these new technology ideas. I get to do the same thing. I get to look at a lot of creative ideas. I get to say no a lot. And the other thing that's really interesting is that I get to say no a lot. And a lot of entrepreneurs hear a lot of no. But one of the characters of these entrepreneurs is that they say, okay, you said no, that's okay, I'll just go to the next person. So there's this incredible drive to be able to shut out the noise from the people that don't want to believe in your vision. I think that's really powerful. So I guess if I had to do something different, I wish I had been an entrepreneur. I've never been an entrepreneur. I wish I'd known enough to kind of at least try it.
Yeah.
My best advice would be networking. I think that this is key in Silicon Valley. You learn a lot meeting people.
So now if I have to do it again, I would like to actually build a product, because I always write about products. I tell people, oh, this product is good or not good. So, but we did that before. I used to work in the video game industry, so I used to actually build a game. So I know how hard it is actually. So I would like to do that again, I think.
Maybe we could switch job. I'd be an entrepreneur.
Go ahead, someone had a question. Yes?
So I don't know how about the States, but with many people of my age, and I'm born 1989 in Europe, there's like this trend of...
This will be one of the last times you will say your age, by the way. No, I just mean in 20 years you're not going to say anything anymore.
So there's kind of this trend of treating in a certain way. So I mean, most of the innovation, most of the technology has been about optimizing and kind of like making the best of your time, being really time efficient, and that just where we just have this feeling, well, we don't want to work 60 hours a week and we don't want to be like available all the time. So do you see any kind of like this downsizing your personal life in any kind of business model, or do you see like there's a business, or do you also see this in your personal life? You just want to downsize?
Well, the irony is that actually in Silicon Valley, most of the big success stories are not about being more efficient with your time, but wasting more of your time and getting more of your attention and putting more advertising in front of you. So if you look at Facebook or
Or
Pinterest.
Flipboard.
All this, this is all
Flipboard
about.
on the iPad. How many hours do we waste
It's a
on
form
that?
of
right?
entertainment,
Hours.
really, and
there's a lot of play involved, but I want to come back to tie up what Fred said earlier in terms of networking. I think this is also a cultural aspect in Europe. You're exchanging your time for money, and then your life is really, outside of whatever you do for the money that you get as a salary, right? It used to be in the US the same thing in the 60s and the 70s. People would get on the train, go to their job 9 to 5, but their life was in the evening on weekend. Silicon Valley, there's a tremendous amount of woven fabric between personal life and professional life, and it's networking is a big. Why are we here 9 p.m. on a weeknight? Because it's part of our personal life as well as part of our professional life. So there's this duality that makes it. You're spending 80, 90, 100 hours a week. You can't really divide between work and personal and play and sometimes it's a pain in the neck. You've got to do stuff that aren't fun, and sometimes it's really fun. It's a lot of play.
Well said.
No, it's absolutely true. All right, last thing. What is one thing? I love that when, did you ever watch Chris Matthews? He has his short show in the end. He always says, tell me something I didn't know. So I thought, okay, tell us something that we didn't know. Wait a minute, they got the questions ahead of time, all right? So, but I said this is not a forced question. If you have something to say, great. If you don't, you can say pass. Well, Frédéric, you had two.
I think the first one is I think the future is not always in Silicon Valley. I think I was really amazed last time I went to Shanghai. For example, if we speak about social networks, here you have LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, and that's it. If you go to China, you have 100 social networks. They are all profitable, and they are very focusing on privacy, which will be key in the future. How you look at that privacy. So I think that don't scout startups only in Silicon Valley. There are amazing startups in South America, in Africa, for example, in Asia. So for me, it's really impressive. For example, in Shanghai, you have a fantastic social network where they develop their own language. It's called Mars. And for example, teenagers are very happy because their parents can't read their social network message. And it's the same for the government. So I think that there are very, very innovative way to do business in social networks. So that's one.
My original answer was that whole, connected things.
That's
and
okay.
healthcare
I think we can accept that one.
But I think one thing to point out is, which goes into what you're saying, is that here, despite all the business challenges, and despite all the negative press that they're getting, they're still outselling Apple by a wide margin with feature phones and kind of low-end smartphones that are doing exactly into emerging countries. So we shouldn't forget about that.
To follow up on your idea, I think that there's a lot of excitement about new companies and new trends. But if you look at the good old businesses, they are very they still stand very strong and they are still formidable competitors. So huge companies like Microsoft or something like that should not be underestimated because they have a large pool of talent. They have the infrastructure, the money, and the experience to sometimes catch up with the new trends. While you need to keep your eyes on the young companies, you also need to keep an eye for the incumbents, and so don't forget that it's very important.
So there's a gravity well for microphones here. They all one thing that I learned recently, and I don't know if you know that or not, but I sort of didn't know that there's 1 billion people on the African continent, and that kind of blew me away. 1 billion people on the African continent, and because there's not the same restriction on population and number of children in China, and it's a different philosophy than in India, this number is just going to explode in the next 10 to 15 years. And that has some really, really fundamental, interesting consequences from everything, from social to energy to food to water. And that to me, these are the next 25 years is the African continent. And in many ways, because of the historical legacy of essentially the African continent was kind of partitioned out as colonies for the European countries. Europe has a pretty important role to play there. It's not going to be the United States. I mean, United States couldn't care less. China is exchanging, money for natural minerals and rights. The United States couldn't care less about Africa because there's no oil, and so it's between China and Europe.
Any other important points? If not, I want to thank Alain, Hubert, Robert, Eliane, and Frédéric. Thank you all very much for my